Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is our first live stream. We're doing some live streaming now. We're going to try to do this on Saturdays at 7 o'clock GMT. So if you are not familiar with where that is, that's London. So if you're behind us, you're probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast. Yeah, it's great to try to get something done where it's live stream. We'll get right into some of the questions, and we're going to try to keep this at about 20 minutes or so, and we're going to be trying to answer some of your questions towards the end. But there's a chat thing in Instagram and also on YouTube that you can use, or if you're joining via Riverside, you can put your questions into that. Hopefully we can get through some of these topics about leadership today, which is the topic is going to be about why leadership is not always easy or should not be easy. So we're going to get into some of those things. And I've been welcoming your comments, welcoming your questions as you bring them in. If you're joining us live, I want to make sure that you drop a comment in the chat box of where you're from, where you're watching from, if you're watching live. If you are watching this on a replay because you were late, I want to make sure that your comments still get in there, but put the word late there so I can know who you are. That'll be a lot of fun to try to make fun of you while we're doing that. Again, it's our first live stream. We are streaming this through Riverside, connected to YouTube and Instagram all at once. And I certainly hope that you enjoy everything that you find here. Should be pretty good. So we'll go ahead and get started. I think all of a sudden my clock's not working. Anywho, so let's use the chat here. Send some comments over. Let's get to it. We got one chat in here already. See who we got this from. Hi from Brussels. We got someone from Brussels, Belgium. Looks like Tanya is online with us. Welcome, Tanya. We appreciate your comments and questions as we go through the chat. So let's get right into it before we burn up all our time. So why leadership should not be easy is kind of the title of this live cast. And again, a lot of people think that leadership is one of those things that if you just, well, some people think that you're born with it, right? Some people think that you're just naturally a good leader. And we do have those, right? There are people who are naturally good leaders, but there are some who believe, like myself, that it takes experience to do that. And that's really the whole thing about the Change Agent itself. The podcast and what we try to do is not so much like the practical aspects. It was that, I mean, that is important and those are foundations, but leadership is something that you need experience to really get good at. You can have experts come in and help you learn and how to do those things, but it's just not easy, and it shouldn't be easy. And the topic of that's the topic of today's live stream. And one of the reasons why it shouldn't be easy is because it doesn't help you to be a better leader. And there are a list of those things that we want to kind of go through. So let's go around through that. So look, leadership isn't supposed to be something that you feel safe in doing. It's not supposed to be, it's almost like this comfort factor, right? You've heard people say, get out of your comfort zone. That's leadership. Because if it was super easy, then something would be missing, right, from leadership itself. And it's really important to understand that leadership is oftentimes about avoiding those hard parts, which is what we tend to do. We have a self-protection factor in our brain, right? We always want to make sure that we're protected. And whenever we get into situations that don't feel comfortable, that feel like we are at risk of embarrassment or danger, we tend to shy away from that. That's just natural. And leadership requires you to have that certain level of courage that you can go into and really get it. Make sure that you have the ability to look at what's coming down the pipe, saying that's a scary thing. I'm going to take that head on, and this is what we're going to do. So that talks about the term of courage. Courage has to come really before comfort. I mean, I assume everybody would agree to that, right? It has to be before comfort. Like scary decisions are typically the ones that matter the most, right? These are the ones that typically have the most value to them. They tend to reap the most benefits if you go with something scary. And when I say scary, I mean, they're just very uncomfortable for you. And I have examples of this. And you often want to delay scary decisions, um, because it feels like the smart thing to do. Because while we don't want to run into some place or something or some situation that's scary, and a good example of that is in a project that was really large that I had no experience in really leading something that large. It was really scary when I got assigned to it. And so what ended up happening was is I tried to find ways to go through and delay that, but it didn't really work. But in actuality, that scary situation in the end turned out to be one of the best projects I ever led. It was the most fun. I learned the most from it. But if you look back at the very first 5 seconds of that in terms of theoretical time, metaphorical time, it was really, really scary. And what you'll find is that after you've begun this scary journey into leadership and into project management or whatever you're doing, you're responding to some kind of crisis or disaster or a military conflict or whatever it is you're doing at any level, you'll find that the courage will always be the forebearer to clarity. And what I mean by that is that we often find that we get the courage up to go do it before we realize exactly everything that we're going to do. And so that's just natural flow and progression of the way that we begin to lead. And in that, everyone, I'm pointing at you out there, everybody, that's the seed and the foundation for effective leadership. The courage before clarity. I do podcasts on these several times, but you'll find that that's the fastest way to get your leadership belt tightened. And then you're going to find that having to make decisions as you're moving through that, because remember, you've got the courage, you're starting to lead, you don't have clarity. And so you're just kind of going at it without all of the information. This is the other part. You need to make decisions without having all of the information. That in itself is super scary. How many times have you been asked to make a decision and you go, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And what about that? Sometimes you just don't have those answers. Sometimes those answers are actually held back from you on purpose by people that are maybe your boss or stakeholder, or maybe they're just not available, or maybe that there's a time delay between the time that information is collected, the time that it's processed and sent to you. Maybe you don't have that kind of window of waiting that you can do that on. And so it's really important that you realize that leadership also means I have to make decisions without having all the information. In a podcast that we just recently did with Olga Rudneva, who's the CEO of Superhumans from Ukraine, she mentioned in that conversation with me that in wartime, especially in times of crisis like what Ukraine is going through, it was requiring leaders to make decisions on 80% information than it was to wait for 100% of it, right? And so in my military days, we always used to say an 80% this a decision made on 80% of information on time is better than 100% information late. And so just remember that that's what it takes to get through that first part of leadership. The next part I want to talk about is saying no to the boss. This is a very scary situation to say no. Other podcast guests have also talked about this very topic, the last two, in fact. And no is a very difficult word to say to someone that is superior to you in almost any case, unless you have some very specific things that you can rely on. So remember this, that when you have someone in front of you, it's often the case that saying yes, if not always, is always the easiest path. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. But maybe you disagree with it. Maybe you don't know exactly how to do that. And so you say yes, because that's just the easiest path to get out of that moment of perceived conflict of saying no to someone that's superior to you. But remember that it's not always the best to just say yes and move on. Saying no does carry quite a bit of personal risk to you, maybe even professional risk. Think about that as you stand in front of someone and say, I'm not going to do what you've told me to in that exact way, or I'm not going to do those exact things, or maybe not exactly right now. Those things do carry some risk. You could get fired. Maybe your boss is intolerant of you rejecting anything. And I know people who are in that situation right now. So just remember that no carries risk, but that's the courage part. That's why we talked about courage in the beginning. But respect that you're really after, respect comes from the idea that you have conviction, not compliance. So let me give you an example. When I was in the Army, I had a leader who told me that the reason why I was in the office and talking to him is because when I was given an exam to some soldiers that relied heavily on the availability of data, that me pushing data to different systems and doing stuff while they were taking the exam is why it closed, why the exam shut down and the systems crashed and everybody was left hanging out in the wind. And they had to come up with all these reasons of how they were going to do the exam and how they're going to retest all these people. And he was like, why would you do something so careless as moving data from one system to another during an exam? I knew I didn't do that. It wasn't me. And I knew that the infrastructure that we had for pushing data was uh, definitely capable of doing this. And so I just didn't feel like it was something that was related to me. At that moment, I had silence. And I'm going to talk about that again in a second. Um, Respect comes from conviction. I was convicted to myself. I had the conviction that I was right. And so I stood there for a minute and I thought about what I'm about to do. I'm going to jump off this ledge. Do I confront this guy who's my boss, who's well respected in our area, or do I um, back down and say, yes, you're right, the easy path? Well, I ended up doing my path. I had a conviction and I went with it. That was the hard part. And you know what happened? He told me after the conversation, he goes, okay, well, I've heard what you have to say. You can leave the office. About a week later, he brought me back in and said, I have to tell you that my respect for you grew because you told me no and you told me what you thought. And after doing some investigations, we found you were right. And so that was really where it went to. And I gained respect from this person that I respected because he was so smart and so well known and so well respected in the community that me going against him is something that made him respect me more. So think about that as you go into your next situation with your boss or someone that's superior to you. And just disagreeing with somebody is one thing, but disagreeing well is really where you get the respect from. It's also perfect in leadership roles because if you can disagree, sorry, if you can disagree with someone well, then respect will come and all of those different things will happen. If you handle disagreement well, you'll be much more respected. And about the silence part, remember that's also a thing too. You don't always have to say the first thing that comes out of your mouth. I have a severe problem with this being much faster than that. I always think less quickly than my mouth does, and I always think deeper after I've said something than I wish I could. But anywho, let's get on to the next one because we're burning up through some time. So we've got about 8 minutes left. We're kind of on. It's kind of a lightning thing. I think is kind of fun. Um, Big projects. Let's talk about that real quick. So big projects, those are very scary if you've never done them. Once you've got them under your belt, then you get a rhythm and you kind of get those done. But in the beginning, those big projects, they expose some pretty big gaps, not just in terms of the capabilities of what your organization can do and how much they can handle, but it also exposes gaps in the ability for you to lead big projects. Leading small projects, leading small things, leading small instances of, you know, a crisis, emergency response thing, or whatever the case may be, a disaster. If they're smaller on scale, it's different when they're much larger on scale. And so you never really kind of feel ready, right? You never kind of feel ready at first when you're getting these things done. You don't really know if you have all the pieces in play. You don't know if you've really got everything you need. Do I have my organizational process assets, or my OPAs, they say, in place? Do I have all my policy documents in place? Do I have my team? Do I have a structure? Do I have a process? How often are we meeting? What will we do if there's a disagreement? So it's just like all of these different things that can go through. And as you go through that pre-checklist of execution on the project, you're going to find that there are some gaps when this thing really starts. And this is where the responsibility comes in. The idea that you're leading this new thing, it's big or it's complex, and you're starting to go off and you're finding these gaps. This responsibility, this feeling of responsibility that you now get, is what drives growth for you, because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't fail. I don't want to do these things, and so I'm going to force myself to learn. Um, my sister-in-law was taking a course. She's like, I'm taking this course because I want to do better at it, and these are the things that I'm doing. And so she took the course, and those things that she's doing to plug in those empty moments in her life where she can get better is a result of being responsible. And so I think that a lot of times I do that. I sign up for courses because I want to be responsible. I feel responsible, and I don't want to fail my people and I don't want to fail the organization. Avoidance of any problems that you have, they keep you kind of small. They don't let you grow, right? And so you want to make sure that you're just not doing that. You're not avoiding things, right? Go out and have the courage to meet them head on and feel the responsibility, feel that uncomfort that you what may have been avoiding your whole time. And remember that confidence will soon come after you've committed to being driven on that project or driven in your role. Um, the next piece I want to talk about, and there are two more before we get closing out of here, is not being saved by the person who says, "Yes, I'll help you," every single time. As leaders, we find that we often have a mentor, someone that we kind of go after, and we watch them and we shadow them. We do the things that they do. Maybe we ask them questions. We go to courses with them, whatever the cases are. And those individuals will often develop a sense of ownership to you. I got to take care of this young guy, Eric, because he doesn't really know what's going on, and so he's come to me for help, and here we are. Um, every time I ask this individual, could he help me out? He'll say yes, or she'll say yes. And then whenever something happens, there's a problem coming or I feel uncomfortable, I go to this person and they are the yes person and they fix it every single time. And that can become a crutch and that can be a real obstacle to you becoming a grown leader. It won't allow you to evolve. And so it's just really one of those things that you have to get past of always using someone as a crutch, right? This ownership that you then get when you do that creates that discomfort that you're going to feel. And all of the things that we kind of previously talked about are the things you're going to want to do to help alleviate that discomfort. And the ownership is something that you're really going to need to keep with you because as you're going through and going forward, the more you have that pride of ownership that you can do these things, the more fun you're going to have leading, the more fun leadership will be, the more fun these things will be, the more competent you're going to become, the more confident you're going to become. And you have to remember that struggle builds judgment. If everything was always easy, you'd never learn anything. It was just that simple. We need struggle, we need conflict, we need things like this so that we can understand what the right decisions were, what the wrong decisions were, what the right approach was, what the wrong approaches are. And leaders, oftentimes, when they make decisions like this, they often find themselves just by themselves in the room. Everybody else is on the other side of the table, and it's you against them. It's a one to many relationship in that case. And that's a very scary place to be when you're all by yourself making a decision. And that goes back to the conviction part. When you're all by yourself and you know you're right, you've done everything you can, everybody's in check, you haven't missed anything. Are you going to stand up for what you believe in? And you should. And now we'll go into the other part. Risk is scary. Risk is part of the job of being a leader. There's a chance that you could screw everything up. People can get hurt. And you have to be ready to make those quick decisions, those calculated decisions of what you're going to do. And you have to remember that risk is unavoidable. You're not going to get away from it. You have risk identified. You have risks identified before you start the project. At least you better be identifying what risks there are, regardless of what size the project is. What are my risks? And what am I going to do with them? Am I going to mitigate them, avoid them? Am I going to transfer them to someone else, like what you do with insurance? Like I've got a risk of getting into a car accident, but I'm going to transfer that risk to my insurance company. So these types of things are the things you got to keep in mind. And there are no guarantees that come with leadership that you're going to have risk or that you're going to be able to avoid it or manage it. You just got to make sure that you have all your processes in place and that you're thinking clearly as you go through. Safe choices don't always move the outcome either. Like if you make a safe choice, like, okay, we've got this project and it's due on Saturday, I'm going to bring in all of my people. Well, that doesn't necessarily move the outcome because now you've got more cost and you've got more people to manage, and so there are different things that can happen by bringing in more resources. And you have to accept whatever the consequences are, good or bad. Take those out publicly and privately. If your boss comes to you in the public meeting and states that you've done something wrong, and then which they shouldn't be doing in public, but if they did, I would, if I were you, I would try to make sure that you were in the acceptance mood. Silence is a decision. Don't talk. You have two of these and one of those, and respond to that in time, right? And let's get ready to close this. We've got about a minute left. My goal was 20 minutes. I've got 1 minute left. Although, live streams are really not time-based, are they? We could stay here all night. Tonya says in the chat that she hates small projects. Only big, difficult, and complex. Uh, I agree. Small projects in the beginning, I think if you're like just starting out with leadership, I think that those are probably pretty fun, just because you get a chance to get the rhythm, how things feel. You start learning a lot about yourself of how you want to lead and how you want to run projects by taking those small ones and kind of getting just a battle rhythm down. And then once you go forward and you get the bigger ones, you'll find that that small set of battle rhythm workflows that you've made for projects didn't scale to a large project like that. That's what scared me when I had small projects and I transitioned into a big one. The things that I was doing there didn't fit for the big ones. And I had to kind of reinvent that. What I actually ended up doing was quite simple. Uh, I was a neophyte. If you don't know what that means new, unexperienced. But neophyte sounds like a bad word to me. so, um, but what I ended up doing was developing workflows in leadership that did scale with the size of the project. So I was able to kind of just copy and paste the same things over and over and over, especially if you have a large infrastructure for project management behind you, it makes it a whole lot easier. So in closing reflection, let's look at this really quickly. Easy leadership is not leadership. Difficulty is part of the responsibility that you have. If someone didn't think you were ready to lead and to face those difficult situations, you probably wouldn't be in that situation, right? You deserve it. So you need to go out there and take charge of it. Be courageous and say no and do the things that you want to do and make sure that you have the conviction to stand up for the people. Make sure you have the conviction to always do what's right and always take that hard right over the easy wrong. And remember that growth that we have in wanting to experience in leadership comes with discomfort. And as you go through and you navigate all these complexities and obstacles and challenges and discomfort periods and all these different things, those things will start teaching you more and more and more. You'll get more experience, it'll get easier, and then you'll become a better leader. So these are some of the foundational things that we wanted to talk about in the podcast. It's a very first podcast that we have, and I'm really excited about it. And we're getting some comments. See what we got here. So Brussels says, it's great when you have time for real pre-mortem, not only face all risks after they've happened. That's true. I mean, you as you go through, they do lots of different types of risk analysis preemptively before a project begins its execution. And what I find is that there are likelihoods of those happening, right? We bend those out into likelihoods of those happening that will happen, most definitely happen, maybe happen, won't, very likely, unlikely that they'll happen. Or they can assign percentages of likelihood, right, that they would happen. And you'll find that you may not experience all of these inside the risk register where you keep all of this stuff in a formal project management structure. The risk register will have that likelihood and what the responses are going to be and who's going to own that risk if that happens and so forth and so on. And you'll find that many times you didn't think of one that actually happens. There have been many times when I had a whole risk register full of stuff. And then the ones that actually came up or happened, I just didn't think of it. Neither did my team. And so that goes on to a quick point before we close out of here. Don't think like you're responsible for by yourself figuring out all the risk. You have a team, right? You take that team, get them around the table and say, listen, we're about to undertake this task, big or small. And we need to think of things that could go wrong. We also need to think of things that could go good, because a risk is not just a bad thing. A risk could be, hey, we're beginning our project. We've got all of these things in place. These are the things that we're going to do. What are we going to do if, and that's a risk. What are we going to do if the customer gives us more work? That's a risk. You're going to have get more money. You have to get sponsorship. You have to get people. You have to get infrastructure. You have to get processes. There's a whole bunch of things that are possible happening at that moment. And so anyway, looks really good. I think we're having a great time. The hard question that I'm going to pose to everybody on this live stream is, what hard decisions are you avoiding right now? And how are you going to go about those? Think about those for the week. As we get into the next live stream next Saturday at 7 GMT London time, maybe we'll chat about those. If you want to send them over to me on Facebook, on Instagram, visit the website, shoot us an email at engage@thechangeagent.studio. You can reach us there. That's our email. In fact, I think um, I can put that website right here on the screen. Hopefully, you can see that. If you can't, I see it on Riverside, but it's www.thechangeagent.studio. And if you want to catch us on Instagram, it's at the Change Agent Podcast. I'll put that in the on the screen there. You probably can't see that. I'm not sure if you can. Give me some comments. Tell me if you can see those things. And then you can also catch us on YouTube, which it's easy to find us there. And then on Apple Podcasts, you can find us there. And we're also on Spotify and other venues that we have. And so again, thanks for everybody that joined. If you're watching this late, put late comments in there. I was late, and then give me the comment. Tell me where you're from as well. It's going to be really interesting to see all that. Thanks again. Tune in next time and next Saturday at 7 o'clock p.m. in London time to join us. And until then, we're out of here. See ya.